this is a panel discussion. And when we were developing the agenda for this, we thought, well, we're going to be down in the Gulf, we're going to work our way up, we're going to go through New Jersey, we're going to talk a little bit about New York. Now the question becomes, we've heard a lot about living shorelines, green shorelines, soft stabilization, whatever you want to call it. What happens in New York? Will it work here? Do we want it to be here? What has to happen? And so we thought it would be a good idea to discuss a little bit about the kind of the opportunities, the challenges, and the issues that we might be coming up with as we look at this based on what we've heard that's happened in other states and other parts of this state. And so we thought it would be good to get some of the people that are involved in this, or would be involved probably most closely, and have been hearing about it, and get their, and I don't want to say, well, it's their opinions, because we're not asking them to say, oh, this is my agency's, this is what they say, this is their stance. But we did ask them to talk for about 3 or 4 minutes about what their organization's interest in living shorelines is, what their involvement in living shorelines is, what they think about it. But then we're going to have it open for a little bit of a discussion with the audience. So I've asked them to give that 3 or 4 minute presentation. Then we'll have maybe 1 or 2 questions for each one, and then have an open discussion with everyone at the end. And the first panelist, because I randomly decided to go from federal down to local and the stakeholders, is Len Houston, and he's the chief of the Environmental Analysis Branch of the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers New York District. And he's actually working on, he looks at the biological aspects. He's not an engineer, but he's been looking at living shorelines. And they are also working on a kind of a publication looking at living shorelines in New York and New Jersey. So Len, maybe you can give us a little bit.
All right, thank you, Jay. Actually, my involvement in living shorelines with the Corps began about a year ago in a rather unusual fashion. I was a member of a federal climate partners work group. That's a national program run by EPA. They run it by EPA regions 1, 2, 3, and 4. And the purpose of that group was for the federal agencies to get together and see if they could come up with tools, materials, and other things that would be of help or assistance to the state and local governments in dealing with climate control, sea level rise, and things of that nature. So one of the things that my group was challenged with was come up with a project that you think would be helpful, that could be useful to the states and local individuals. And my group, the group I was with, dealt with New York and New Jersey specifically. There were subgroups for other parts of the country. So I happened to be sitting on they broke us up into groups, as they usually do in all of these work groups. And I happened to be sitting with a representative from NOAA, Elisa Che Banaja. I think some of you might know her. And one of the things we thought about was, well, if you're going to have sea level rise from the climate problems, one of the things you're going to begin noticing is possibly is more erosion, or erosion occurring in areas where there wouldn't occur before. And the erosion is likely to be relatively local, not large-scale erosion. And most people, especially in the New York, New Jersey area, as Jay had mentioned in the beginning of his presentation this morning, aren't that familiar with ways in which they can deal with erosion other than, well, build a bulkhead, or put some concrete or some cement or something like that. And in reality, a lot of the small localities are probably more appropriate dealing with smaller measures like living shorelines. So Elisa and I said, wouldn't it be interesting if we could just put together a brochure? Not a how-to manual, nothing technical, just something designed to go out to all the local groups, the organizations and whatnot, and let them know that there are options out there. What conditions the options may work in, what conditions the costs might be. Let them know there are alternatives that might be appropriate. And if they thought those alternatives were indeed appropriate for them, who they can contact to get more information. The whole idea was it to be very reader-friendly, very non-technical, very brochure-like. So we put that idea back to the climate partners, and they said, yeah, it's a great idea, go ahead and do it. And they said, okay, you got any money for us to do this with? I said, of course not. You have to find your own funding. Well, we did actually find funding through a group called SAGE, the Systems Approach to Geomorphic, I forget what the E stands for, but it's a national organization that's put together with the Corps, FEMA, and other agencies are in it, and their idea is to promote these non-traditional approaches. They thought it was a good idea to get the word out in the New York, New Jersey area because we didn't have much experience with it, so they provided some funding. And Elisa became the representative for NOAA, and Kate Hauppauge, who's one of my biologists, became the lead for the district, and the two of them worked together on how to put this brochure together, which was going to be two parts. The first one was going to be to let people know what was out there and what conditions they might be appropriate, and the second one would be a case study. So if somebody thought it was appropriate, they'd have contact points to go to, and they'd have case studies which would gear them toward an idea of whether or not it would work. Again, it was only an idea of putting together what other people had put all over the place, put it into one quick, easy-to-read document or brochure, something that a lot of the small local municipalities that don't have that expertise would just be able to look over really quick and then get more information. So we started putting together that brochure, and we had a format for it, met with many people, many of whom actually spoke today, and other people in this room, and they've got together an outline for that report. As a matter of fact, this meeting is very fortuitous because just recently, about 2 weeks ago, they sent out a questionnaire. The questionnaire was geared towards practitioners in this area. They wanted them to provide answers to questions which they could then use to help format that brochure. Many of you have probably received those questionnaires, and those of you who don't, we have copies of them today, and I would greatly appreciate anyone here who's worked in that area to come up and I'll raise your hand later on, and I'll make sure that Kate provides you with a copy of the questionnaire. You can get it back to us, and we can be sure it's folded in. The idea is to get the first phase of the brochure out in August. So the more information we have now, the better it would be at this particular point. And I don't know, Kate, are you here? Kate, could you just pass out the one-pager? The one-pager sort of describes what I just said now. Kate's going to be the point of contact that has her contact information. And then Kate will have copies of the questionnaire available. If you haven't received one, I encourage you to please get one from her or myself at the end of this and get it back to us so we can get this brochure out. The idea is to disseminate it to local and state agencies, organizations, homeowners, as wide as possible. Thousands of these brochures hopefully will come out for that respect. Okay?
One question that's kind of related, you were the Corps of Engineers, and so you're involved in this project in some way, although you didn't give money. Is the Corps looking at these types of approaches as part of their environmental analysis? Do they try to take a look at living shorelines, or is it too early for them to be looking at it here? Have they recognized it, kind of accepted it?
Quite definitely. There is a desire, especially after Sandy, to look at a lot of more innovative approaches to ways of dealing with shoreline erosion. Now, a lot of our projects are relatively large projects, and many of them are on highly dynamic shorelines, which might not be appropriate for some of the solutions we talked about today. That said, it doesn't mean that on a large project area, there might be small little subsections where this type of approach would come in handy. Plus, we also have smaller individual authorities which are designed to look at small projects. Those are where we think the living shoreline actions would be more appropriate, especially those that are designed for restoration, environmental restoration. So yes, we're definitely looking at those now very strongly.
Does anyone have a question for Lev? We'll have time to come back and discuss it. If not, I'm going to go to the next panelist is Steve Papa. He's a senior wildlife biologist with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. He's located here on Long Island at Shirley. And he deals a lot with endangered species. He also deals a lot with the permitting issues. So Steve, you want to give us a little background on Fish and Wildlife Service?
Good afternoon, Jay. Thanks for having me. It's been a pleasure to participate in this workshop. Steve Papa with Fish and Wildlife Service, as Jay introduced me. I work for the Ecological Services Division, which is primarily endangered species recovery and conservation planning and assistance, which has under that umbrella permit reviews, as well as engagement with The topic of living shorelines is very, I guess it's very timely for us right now with Katrina not Katrina, Sandy, that was mentioned previously. How we get to sustainable environments, ecosystems is of interest to me. Research on the effects of the types of projects that were described and went over today on fish and wildlife resources, sustainable populations, is something I'd be very interested in learning more about and participating in any studies that may come in the future. We have a number of endangered species, well, a couple of bird species on Long Island that are protected under the Federal Endangered Species Act. And to some degree, we've been dealing with the issue of living shorelines, or the topic of that over the years. Someone described earlier that it used to be named, or one of the many names was soft stabilization projects. And we've we're confronted with those every year, mostly in the form, I think, of small dredging projects around the 3 estuaries on Long Island, and local projects where material is taken out of a channel and placed on the beach, and oftentimes eroded beaches, so in some cases providing habitat for endangered species. So, looking at projects like that have both positive and potentially negative impacts is something of interest to us. And I guess finally, we see maybe on a larger scale some of the soft solutions that are being looked at by the different federal agencies, like the Corps of Engineers, for shoreline protection, for instance, on the Barrier Islands, on the bay side of the Barrier Islands, and how those may impact endangered species and promote conservation. So again, that's my overall interest in this, and I hope there's another workshop that focuses on the biological aspects beyond the plants of living shoreline projects.
Not for a while.
Well, I guess after you've looked at what people were doing this morning, I know there's a lot of questions on what are the ecological services, has anyone quantified it? I guess I have really 2 questions. Have any of your brethren in the other regions where they've done this more been looking at that? Do you know? And 2, what would your gut instinct be about, okay, if it's this or a bulkhead, say it's either or, rock in the heart, or rock in the living shoreline, whatever you want to call it. So there's 2 questions there. Have they been looking at that in a gut reaction? That's not the Fish and Wildlife Service's official stance, but.
So I'll take the second question first. I think that there's definitely more value in even a marsh fringe habitat than in a bulkhead environment. We see many examples of that. Either it's somebody's lawn, or you have some Spartina marsh or what have you. So you're definitely going to get. We've probably all seen it if you're taking a walk either to a pocket park or even at the end of a culvert, for instance, where you have some sediment that's built up and maybe a wader of sorts, availing themselves of that habitat. So, other than geese, who like manicured lawns, I think marsh fringe habitat does have its value. Question is, does it affect populations? Is it regionally important, for conservation of particular species? On the question of what are other regions doing, I've looked through research, 4 research papers on that question, and it's varied, what's going on out there. There doesn't seem to be a standardized approach to, looking at the effects of these types of projects. So I think mostly undertaken, based on the intuitive sense that, creating marsh fringe habitat or something even larger is better than bulkheading. So.
Does anyone have any questions for Steve?
We've worn them out, I think. So. Our next speaker is, we're going to the state now, and it's Don McReynolds. I always get the title, I know she's the head, but it's the section head of the Bureau of Marine Resources at DEC. She's really involved in the tidal wetlands permitting, and that's obviously going to be very important if we're talking about living shorelines and this type of approach. So maybe give us
Sandy. I think from the state's perspective and being the Marine Habitat Section Head, we need to start considering looking into some of these practices as part of our kind of regulatory shoreline mechanisms. And I think there are some possible hurdles with this. I mean, we regulate these under our Tidal Wetlands Act and Article 15, protection of waters. And those regulations kind of make you jump through some hoops when you're doing things in the water. And I think, it's time to start demonstrating some of these. It's time to start understanding the biology of some of these. Will they have a net environmental benefit? And if they do have a net environmental benefit, we can jump through those hurdles. I think some of the other things that folks were talking about today with respect to understanding what types of projects work where is something that we need to think about developing here on Long Island and in the city. And not only in a regulatory context, but we also deal with these a little bit through our estuary programs. I think our estuary programs are starting to think about what soft shorelines are appropriate and their role in the whole soft shoreline concept. What are we going to support them? I think they generally support a lot of them. But what is our role? What role are we going to play? Are we going to help understand the biology, the shoreline processes, and help managers understand how to best utilize these techniques?
I guess one question I would have is, do you think looking at what they did this morning, what they've done in other states, and the information they've developed, do you think with the present permitting system that even those demonstration projects could go in? Do you think that's possible, or do you think there's going to have to be more organic or structural changes that have to be done even before you can do demonstration projects?
Well, I think whatever project, I think demonstrations and pilots are a good idea. You will need to go through the regulatory process and meet the standards for permit issuance. Are they reasonable and necessary? Is there an erosion control problem at the site? And take one concept as an example, these sill kind of structures with planting behind them. Those are conducting an activity in our regulation that is deemed incompatible, but not totally impermissible. So you need to identify, and I think we need to study the biology of these certain structures and understand a little bit more about them and overcome that incompatible presumption and define whether or not there's a net environmental benefit. And I think, it's baby steps. We do incorporate some of these types of projects. We have incorporated some projects on the lesser impact scale, more planting of intertidal areas, wire logs, a little bit less intrusive than placing rock. But I think we need to start taking the baby steps, the steps necessary to see if we can get to the next phase and do pilots and do demonstrations and help overcome that burden. And I think a bigger entity might have to undertake that. A lot of times Joe homeowner or the Joe applicant doesn't have the wherewithal or the money sometimes to overcome that burden and do a few studies that would help these projects along. So, good idea.
Does anyone else have any questions? Ron? First one.
How about aesthetically? Maybe homeowners, that are just having a hard shore, that look at their boat, and it's swimming into the water, out into the water. Maybe homeowners don't think that's receptive. They're not just having money in the woods to actually have more creatures, more mosquitoes, maybe, and having to have plants that are going to change the scope of the uses.
So yeah, I think the question was, we talked about aesthetics and homeowners not necessarily thinking that the grasses and the possibility of mosquitoes or whatever other misconceptions they might have is the thing that they like. So I think one of the roles maybe of, the estuary programs and other programs could be the educational component, letting the homeowners or getting the homeowners to understand the benefits of this landscape continuing down into the water. Everybody thinks about their shrubs around their house and their grass as their landscape and the things that they need to maintain and the benefits that are associated with that to them. Maybe they also need to understand the benefits of the landscape that might go down into the water. That could be a positive for them.
If we had a number of residents or corporations or whatever who would be willing to set up a pilot or a demo as, let's say, part of a grant, would that have to get individual permits from DEC, or could there be a general permit that would allow that in terms of like a pilot or whatever?
That would require a permit, not a general permit. We don't have general permits yet for these kinds of activities, but would require an individual permit. And I think as many of the folks today who talked about these concepts, it's good to get all the entities in the room at the same time. The regulators, who in our circumstances are also the biologists, the coastal engineers, and the people doing the construction, to talk about how best to design a project of this type or whatever type is being applied for.
Okay, thank you. Now we have a pinch hitter. On the agenda it says Jeff Safiri, but he couldn't make it for personal reasons, but we're lucky Barry Pendergrass, who I've worked with for a number of years now, came down and he's going to give us the DOS, Department of State, and I never remember what it is. Is it Coastal Management Program now, or is it Division of Coastal Resources and Waterfront Revitalization? But whichever one it is, it's coastal management in New York. So, Barry.
Thanks, Jay. The Department of State is the home of the Coastal Zone Management Program for New York. We're authorized under the federal Coastal Zone Management Act, and all of the coastal states, I believe except Alaska, which dropped out, have a CZM program. So there are two, I think, program areas that we have that are most applicable to living shorelines applications. The first is that we have a planning program where we develop local waterfront revitalization programs, which in partnership with local governments, which are a refinement of the state policy approach to shoreline management that addresses local needs more specifically. Both the planning and implementation actions under those local waterfront revitalization programs, or LWRPs, both the planning and the implementation can be funded at a 50-50 cost share ratio with our local partners through the Title 11 of the Environmental Conservation Law, the Environmental Protection Fund. So we have quite a few LWRPs throughout the state. A smaller number of them formally completed out on Long Island, but quite a few in the planning process, and some completed on Long Island. New York City has its own WRP. So within that planning framework, we can cultivate these kinds of shoreline management approaches, and that would be consistent with the state's objectives to conserve living resources in the water and protect water quality and provide for all the various uses that we want to obtain from our waterfronts. The second program area that we have that's germane to this issue is the Coastal Consistency Authority we have. We are able to review federal actions, including funding, direct federal actions, and permit approvals to determine consistent with the state coastal policies. And in that context, we use the 44 state coastal policies to interpret the impact of the proposed action. And those policies cover water quality, living resources, public access, air quality, the whole gamut of environmental conditions of the waterfront. If we find that proposed federal action or permit approval is contrary to any of the policies, then we can reach a finding that we do not concur with the federal decision and prevent that from going forward. Now, as a practical matter, we try to avoid coming to a point where one agency is butting heads with another directly on a decision. So what we prefer to do is work with the federal agencies whenever we can and try and cultivate their decisions and our decisions at the same time so that they can grow. And we like to work with the Army Corps on their projects and FEMA and other federal agencies. So I think there are lots of opportunities for us to expand the use of these kinds of living shoreline opportunities. I don't think that, I think that our agency has a long history of promoting vegetative approaches to managing erosion. I don't think that we really have a deep range of experience in these kinds of hybrid structures. We have funded some pilot projects. I believe that we used the EPF funding to pay for part of the project that John Miller talked about on the Harlem River as an example. So we are interested in these kind of projects and we would like to expand their application, and we do have some tools to use for that purpose.
Okay, one question, so what you said, the 44 policies, do you see any conflict in the 44 policies with utilizing this approach?
I don't see a conflict with the 44 policies. In fact, this approach would tend to be more congruent with the 44 policy objectives to husband the environment in a positive way than traditional structural approaches. In fact, the policies express a clear preference for non-structural approaches over structural approaches. The devil's always in the details, and the problem is that these kinds of new things that are relatively new for New York, we're not used to evaluating them and measuring, their net effects. So when you're getting a decision from us on whether that proposal meets the policy objectives, I think it takes a little bit more scrutiny than the standard approach that we've seen in the past.
Does anyone have any questions for the DOS? I have one more then. These coastal reconstruction zones, and in your packet there's a little thing on what they're doing in response to Sandy. Do you think this could fit into, let's say, developed plans, the coastal reconstruction zone, if it meets the state's permits?
Yes, absolutely. We would like, the coastal reconstruction zone process utilizes our authority to create these local waterfront plans, and we try to dovetail our recommendations on reducing storm damages with the federal recovery support functions. That is the way that the federal agencies manage their resources to recover from Hurricane Sandy. So that community reconstruction zone program is getting underway probably in June, and we will use the planners, our liaisons within our office, to try and advocate these more beneficial approaches to shoreline management, and we'll have to see what it is that the individual communities want. And I
tried a lot of new approaches, and he's involved in, I guess you're involved in reviewing every permit that comes in to South Pole. So he has seen a lot. We asked him here to see what the local perspective is. It was his town that I showed the few kind of living shorelines we had, those low bulkhead marsh sills in South Pole. And so he had been involved in those. He's been helpful in helping me identify where those structures are and how they've been performing.
Thank you, Jay. It's great to be up here with this panel. Just to start off, the trustees in Southold were formed under one of the old English patents, the NGOs patent, and it gives us the rights, or we own the underwater lands in Southold. Our jurisdiction goes from the surface waters halfway out in the bay, when I say halfway, like halfway to Southampton, to 100 feet landward of the wetland boundary. So that's very unusual for us in that a lot of our permits, as you might expect, are for people that want to do construction of homes or additions to homes or modifications of their homes or their driveways or their porches or their swimming pools or whatever. And maybe a third of ours, actually, are permits that come in, or permit requests that come in, are for the true wetland area. We have tried to implement what's referred to as living shorelines over the last several years, and we've tried to sell them to property owners. And what we found is private property owners have gotten it. They do understand now that in low energy areas, bulkheads are not the way to go, unless made possibly, as Jay referred to, the low sill bulkheads, which we've been very successful with several low sill bulkheads, with creating habitat behind them that's been beneficial both environmentally, and the private property owners have enjoyed that also. They are seeing the benefits of revetments versus bulkheads. Unfortunately, with Sandy, it set things back for everybody. When I say that is, realistically, the bays in Southold Town were decimated by Sandy, and I mean decimated. Long Island Sound, shorefront, not that much. There are some areas out in Greenport, East Marion that got beat up pretty badly, but the bays were decimated. And people said, see, we put in what you told us to do, and we spent the money for that, and it got destroyed in Sandy. And the slide that was up a little while ago that showed a great shoreline habitat restoration project prior to Sandy and post-Sandy, private property owners might look at that and say, see, it didn't work. And we turn around and say, no, look above where those coral logs were destroyed, and you'll see it did work. If you hadn't used those coral logs, that would all have fallen into the bay, or that would have been destroyed also. So people are getting it, but they're experiencing now the frustration of having to rebuild after Sandy. And like I said, they were decimated. And what's happening now, the cost of rebuilding is gone up exponentially. For example, Cape American beach grass. You used to be able to get it for 10 to 15 or 10 to 12 cents a plug. It's up to 30 cents a plug if you can even get it. And so now a property owner who wants to put in Cape American beach grass can't afford it and has to wait till the next growing season, which will be next fall, when Cape American beach grass will be available again and the plugs will be available, so we can start putting them back in the ground again, so to speak. So for us, we have been promoting these living shorelines. We think they are good in low energy area. The high energy, and unfortunately many of our low energy area became high energy in Sandy, but they are very beneficial, and I think people are getting it. Property owners are getting it, and they are using them more and more.
Okay, I have a question. What kind of information could you, as a local official involved in permitting, talking to homeowners, what kind of information or materials would help you the most?
With any new technology that's been developed, it would be great for us. I'll give you a perfect example. Last month, we had somebody come in that was wanted to put and was representing a couple of private property owners that were in a low energy area that got a tremendous amount of erosion from Sandy, because the waves in this area ended up being 3 to 4 feet where they're normally a foot at most. And Hesco company has come out with these baskets that were similar to the crib cages. And we had somebody come in and show us them. And they're being installed in 2 properties. These are large baskets where they were used in Louisiana after Katrina, filled with oyster shells and then planted with material on top of that. And these large wire cages now, they're going to be held with rocks mostly up here, but then planted with material that will create a natural living shoreline there. And we only became aware of this because somebody came into our office and showed us this technology. The name of the company is HESCO, but I'm sure there's others that have come up with this. And now we're giving this out to people as they come in to our office. So again, when some of these new features are developed, let us know about it so we can make it available for private property owners.
How do you know that they work? I mean,
How do we know that they work? And that's like somebody saying to us, how long is a vinyl bulkhead going to last? And we said, well, vinyl is going to last a long time. We saw vinyl bulkheads that were less than 3 months completed, destroyed in Sandy. How long are they going to last? That's up to Mother Nature.
No, I said, how do you know that they're going to work?
How do we know they're going to work?
Thing that you should use.
Yeah, how do we know they're going to work? Any type of erosion control that's going to include some living organisms, we've all seen in this room, and we're already a member of the congregation here that we're speaking to. We know that it worked. How do you convince somebody else that it worked? What we have to do is send them out and see some of these projects that have been completed and see how they've worked. And once people see that, it helps them buy into it because, again, it's a money issue. They're spending a lot of money on these projects. And so what we need to do is get more and more of these projects out there where people can go and visit it. And there's a property on the Sound in Greenport that hydro-seeded their bluff a little over a year ago, actually close to 2 years ago now. It held up wonderfully in Sandy. It's a fescue-based seed. It grows higher than Cape American beach grass. That bluff held firm through Sandy. We can send people out there to look at that now, and they can see the results. And now, when they talk to the marine contractors, they can say, what about that? It might work for us.
Okay. Any other questions? Dave?
Okay, now we're out of the government sphere and we're getting into even more where the rubber meets the road. This is where the people they're responsible, liable. And we have Ed Parthy here. Ed's been involved in marine contracting on Long Island since I started at Sea Grant and well before that because he was established. So I asked him to come and talk about a little bit about how the marine contractors, especially the traditional marine contractors, are looking at this and what they think about living shorelines and what the opportunities are and what these challenges are going to be from a very practical kind of commercial level.
Thanks, Jim. Well, marine construction is a business, and our business is erosion control. And a customer calls us up, they've got a problem, their bank is washing away. And in the not too far distant future, they would like a solution installed so maybe the house doesn't fall into the water. It would be helpful if to advance these living shorelines, if we could point out some successful projects on Long Island. There's nothing like seeing is believing. And the second thing is that even if they want the living shoreline, they don't want to wait too long for permits because they have an erosion problem and their backyard is going into the creek. Now, right now we have the federal government, the state government, and 2 different agencies 5 years of maintenance. Some contractors may want to do it, but I anticipate most contractors would just subcontract it out to somebody else. That's it.
Okay, so well, one of my questions is going to be what would contractors need to begin, if not building these and to get the permit, to start thinking about them? What type of information or what approaches would be the best to use with the marine contracting industry to get them more aware of it or get them thinking about it?
Well, right now, the contractors have, since the 1930s, at least been putting in bulkheads on Long Island. And their experience is, even if you have erosion at the toe of the bulkhead, they do work for 20, 30 years, or in extreme conditions. Whereas we know, even from Hurricane Sandy, some of the living shorelines just washed away. So they want to see some demonstration projects so that they can explain in good faith to their customers, both worked under these conditions and survived those storms, and you make good choices to what you want. I don't think shoreline owners at this point would go into the agency's mandating of living shoreline without some reasonable assurance it's going to have the same life expectancy as a bulkhead, which is a lot cheaper than a living shoreline, which is more expensive to put in, and then has this additional maintenance cost to keep it effective. And the other thing the contractors are aware of is, even though you have a Spartino term flora or Spartino patents, it is not a natural marsh. It is a constructed marsh, and the literature says it maybe take 5 to 15 years or longer for the marsh grasses to actually become a functioning tidal wetland. So we're talking just using grass for erosion control, but not too much functioning as a wetland.
Okay, does anyone have any questions for Ed, for the contracting business? We have one question.
Ed,
Comment.
there were two points that you mentioned. One was maintenance, correct? In Maryland, I can tell you what we do in Maryland is the contractor, once they finish the project, they have to give a warranty for 85% coverage of the plants for the first year. After that, it's not on the contractors. It's not on the contractors after the first year. But what we also tell folks is, when we talk to the contracting community, we tell them, it would be good if you can actually strike a deal with the property owner, so to speak, and have a long-term maintenance contract. That way, the contracting company, which is actually doing the job, makes money out of this, and the property owner also has a really good marsh established. So maybe that is another idea that you might want to actually check on.
That would probably be attractive to some companies that have a lot, maybe one person or two people do the planting and the rest of the construction.
Right.
But the history is we just do the physical aspects of driving, piling, and things like that. We're not farmers at this point.
Because one of the things that whenever we talk to contractors, say, you know what, we're not trying to take your money. We're not trying to, we're not stopping you from making money. But as long as we have a good, decent project, at the end of the day, that's all that matters. And the second thing you mentioned about a marsh, when you put patents and organoflora, it takes about 5 to 15 years. I'm not sure where that source of the information is, because what we've actually seen is organoflora and patents, and Chris mentioned a couple of other species that can actually work really well. We've actually not seen any major difference between a constructed marsh and a natural marsh. In some cases, we've actually had the constructed marsh work a lot more efficient and effective than a natural marsh. Because with constructed marsh, you actually have a little bit of protection in terms of some kind of a structure or something like that.
Well, I just respond to that. I covered my base. I went on JSTOR, which is this library, accessible library, and they had 1,200 articles on tidal wetlands. And one of them is for marshes. And he said it takes 5 to 15 years for it to function as a wetland rather than just growing grass. And this is just, it's a journal article, it's peer reviewed, and that seems to be what the literature is saying.
Clarify that it takes perhaps longer than that to achieve full functioning. This was looking at the complete normal biodiversity of critters in the soil, the full functioning soil, doing cycling nutrients and all the stuff that it does. It takes a long time for full functioning, but within 1 year, you've got the grasses growing, you have an ecosystem. It may not be as good as a natural marsh that's been there for centuries, but it's a whole lot better than a bare bottom.
Sure. And to add to that, the one pitch that I usually use for living shorelines and riprap project, for instance, of bulkhead, is these bulkhead projects and riprap projects, the day you put it on the ground, that is the best day it's going to see. And afterwards, it's going downhill. The living shorelines project, when you put a living shoreline project on the ground, the day that you complete the post-construction meeting, that is the worst day. And after that, it gets better because the plants are actually coming up, and the structure is actually giving the structure. The biggest misnomer here is living shorelines and no rocks, right? It's living shorelines. It's like the bone is also a living part of the body. So you need that bone to actually give that structure to the body, and you need the rocks in many cases to actually give the structure to the living shorelines. And so after that, it's always going to be better.
More question?
All right, last but obviously not least, we have Aaron Turchunian, who's he's president of First Coastal, and I think most of the people in the room know him. He's been involved in a lot of projects. He was with the New York State NGOs, that's when it was called the Coastal Management Program, I believe. And then he started his own consulting firm. And so he's been working with a lot of the individual property owners on what they can do. So I want to get a kind of consultant's viewpoint of what they think the opportunities are and where they see some of the problems and maybe where we should be going with this.
Thanks, Jay. I'm at the end of the rope, too. Fortunately, there's not enough line to hang myself. I really want to thank Jay Dansky and his assistant Karen Palmieri for bringing together everyone here today. And this is a very, very important issue. So Jay and Karen, thank you very much. It's really a terrific job. I've been, myself and my company, my colleagues have been building living shorelines since 1975. And I can tell you it's not easy being green, even on Eastern Long Island. One of the things that I'll note about this gathering, and I've seen it at many other gatherings as well, is that there aren't any private property owners here that own oceanfront or bayfront property. And so a lot of times what's happening, I'm sorry, with one exception, see that? Two. All right, can I get 3?
You better recount that statement. One more line?
Give me a little more. Get it around my neck. But the point is that a lot of policy is created by people that are not directly impacted by that policy. And in my position, I am forced to deal with both sides of the issue in an attempt to generate a compromise. Because on one side of the policy you have politics and philosophy, and on the other side of the policy you have performance and practicality. Now, no individual is going to spend a lot of money on something that's not going to work, and it doesn't matter if it's a car or a shoreline. The individual who's going to spend that money needs to have a degree of predictability that something's going to perform at a level that they desire and that is rational and real in today's society, not theoretical and not philosophical. So there is a conflict that occurs between politics and philosophy, performance and practicality. Now, in New York State, we've never really come to grips with that issue. But I can tell you, such as adequate toe stabilization. So I have a beautiful bluff restoration, but I know that when I get a wave height of 3.5 to 4.5 feet, that thing's gone because the toe stabilization is inadequate, and I'm precluded from doing that because of regulatory reasons. But I'm encouraged in New York because in the last 3 to 5 years, I've seen a remarkable shift at the regulatory level. And I want to compliment and I want to challenge my colleagues at the DEC, Drew and Dawn over there, because they've done a couple of things in the last couple of years that have really helped out property owners. They've developed guidance for routine projects. And they've issued these guidance memorandums which were sorely lacking for decades. They said, if you do this, you get that. You know what that does, folks? That produces predictability. That's what property owners want. They want us to know that when they're spending money to do something, they actually get the thing that they want out of it, or that they can't get it. But they don't want to be in a guessing game as to what they're going to get at the end of the project. So I want to issue a challenge that when it comes to these living shorelines, to Drew and to Dawn, I think that the elements are there, and I know you guys can do it. So, yay, go ahead. But in New York, for this to work, there's going to have to be compromise. And quite frankly, that compromise is going to have to come from a lot of people in this room. Because if regulators are going to insist that living shorelines are primarily or solely vegetative in nature, you will not get buy-in from property owners. They simply will not do it because they don't have the confidence that the thing is going to perform. Because, quite frankly, I can't give it to them. I can't go to a property owner and say, yes, we're going to build this $100,000 device, and it's going to work. Because if I do that, I get sued. And then I lose my house. So I can't do that. It's professionally unethical to lie to them, and it's financially disastrous. So what I have to say to them is, yes, you're going to invest this $100,000, and a portion of this is going to work really well, and another portion is not going to work at all. And then that property owner is going to say, well, why the hell would I do this? So in order to move living shorelines, sustainable shorelines, I don't care what you call it, off the dime in New York is going to require compromise. And that compromise, in everybody's best interest, needs to be based in science and engineering, not in politics and philosophy. Because when we take the vegetative treatment potential, the VTP, which came out in 1976, I think it was published, it's a terrific document because they went through all the science and engineering and said, in this scenario, vegetation will work. In that scenario, it won't. Well, guess what? If we take another tool out of the toolbox and we provide a nice sill or toe structure, all of a sudden, now we've got a hybrid living shoreline where everybody's walking away a winner. But it's going to require compromise, and it's going to require more work. Thank you.
Anybody have any questions for Aaron? Okay, I think we're at we've worn everybody out. So we're still a little bit, we're out of schedule. I'm not going to keep everyone here for a while, but the question becomes, what do we do next? Where are we going to go? Len's got an answer.
I've got an answer.
Oh.
All right. I've got at least part of the answer. It'll help us a lot. What you can do next is what I said at the beginning. If we gave you one of those questionnaires, we need your input to help make that brochure better and to get that information out, which is essentially what this panel is asking for. If you're a practitioner and you haven't gotten a questionnaire, let us know. Kate's in the back, just raise your hand or motion to her and she'll make sure you get a questionnaire, and we ask that you fill them out and get them to us. And we'll do the best we can to get that information out.
Okay, well that's one option there, but and we hope you'd participate in that. Oscar, you have well, this is why we brought people in that have been working with this for 30 years. So where do we go next? What's your suggestion?
I just have one comment, and that is, I've actually talked to different states, various states that don't have a law in place where they can actually do the projects. So in those cases, the best suggestion is to do a demonstration project on federal land, which is not going to be coming under
to say, I just saw that theme coming up that we need a demonstration project in New York. You might be able to find some of the living shorelines in New Jersey, but that's one of the issues. We do not have the projects to use as examples that are really living shorelines. So we are going to have to take a closer look at that. I don't know.
I was just going to say, I mean, this seems like a subset of a larger discussion that Adam Chunian brought up. You know, it's the issue of private property ownership versus the public trust. And it seems from what we've been presented, we certainly have many examples, and even with Laura's presentation, some here on Long Island, to start getting a handle on, you know, some of these work, some they don't, but what is the impact overall? You know, what, you know, why are we prevented from, or just, we can't adjust the toe or go beyond something? What is the impact if we do? And it seems like maybe that's the next step for Sea Grant or someone to organize, you know, some of that analysis.
Well, I think two things, and I think one of the issues, I mean, we have to do a better job of looking at what the biological issues are, and I think that's been done in some of the states, so we might take a look at that, see what they have found out. But I think part of it becomes the question, as Judy was saying, is if you're looking at what's the difference between the bulkhead and this, I mean, there's some pretty clear, you can say, yes, you don't have to go into a lot of scientific studies to say this is probably better than some of the other alternatives are. It's just going to, you know, erode into the building. But I think the other thing is that people have to see it to believe it. And although you've seen the pictures, and we've seen a lot of examples, we definitely have to draw on those so we don't do the wrong thing. I think we are going to have to look at what can we do to get projects up here. And if, you know, when we did this 19 years ago, we were very excited and we thought something was going to happen. It did not happen. So I think we're going to, if you want to see living shorelines here, we are going to have to work. It's going to take a collective effort. We have put together kind of a living shorelines work group. I hope we can work together a little bit more on this and move this along, but not starting from ground zero, starting from building on the shoulders of our partners to the south and trying to reach something a little bit quicker. I'm going to end, we're at the end of the day here. One thing I did want to mention is when we realized we weren't going to be able to fit everyone in we wanted to, we decided we are videoing this if you didn't see the presentations, and we are going to get those up on a website. Well, it'll be like a podcast type thing. I'll ask the presenters whether we can use their presentations or something they have as PDFs. We'll start getting all this up at one site on the Sea Grant website. So I hope you all registered and we all have your email addresses, because that's what we're going to use to contact you. And as soon as we have this information together, we will send it out so you will be able to get it and then distribute it to other people. Anyone who wants to continue in this or interested, my cards are in each one of the packets that you've had. Feel free to contact me and I can let you know, how you can participate in it. I hope this isn't the last. I hope this is the first step and we can do more looking at this to make sure we do it the right way.
Do you want to mention that other database that's being created?
We have, well, that's what I have people here, and we're one thing that actually all the presenters at the beginning and I have been working on is a national database, online database of living shoreline projects. Well, it's not even from the Gulf now. We have in the Pacific Northwest. This is part of an American Society of Civil Engineers project. It's the Coastal Ocean Ports Research Institute is putting the website up. And what we're trying to do is we have a bunch of different criteria from living shoreline. We have over 50 sites now on the website. It's not quite open, it's not quite done, and we're going to have it open to people so they can start inputting information on the sites. And it has engineering, design criteria, site criteria, performance criteria when it's available. We're working on some copyright issues with photographs. So that's going to be a good tool, a good resource for people, because it's going to have these living shoreline sites around the country, and it's going to have things like what kind of design wave did they use, what type of fetch length was used in that area, how did it perform. I actually had a slide on my presentation, but we want to make sure we have the URL in its final location. Again, anyone that's on the, anyone that registered, we have their email. We'll make sure that you get that information too, so you can we'll stay in touch with you about those things. We'll keep that as a
If you have other people that are interested, have them contact me and we'll put them on that list. Maybe we'll start a listserv with this, or at least get information when we put it out. Finally, I want to thank you guys hung in pretty well today. I'm surprised at how many people are still here. It was a long day and it was a lot of information. But I thank you for coming, and maybe in a year or two. Oh, you know what? I want to thank the panel too. And not only the panel, because a lot of the people were on the organizing committee here. I put them in an awkward position. I told them I was going to answer or ask them very awkward questions, which I kind of held back, but not too much. So I'd like to give them a round of applause for coming out.